Unfortunately, we have some really quite sad news to bring you. This is devastating news. Craig Shakespeare, former Leicester manager, has passed away at the age of 60 after battling illness, especially over the last year or so. Of course, memorably part of the Leicester backroom staff and was assistant manager to Claudio Ranieri when Leicester won the Premier League in 2016. We have got a statement here from the family. It comes through the LMA, the League Managers Association, so I'll read that to you in full. It is with great sadness that we announce the passing of Craig Shakespeare, or Shaky as he was known. Craig passed away peacefully this morning at home, surrounded by his family. Whilst the family are immensely proud of his footballing achievements as both a player and a coach, to us, his family, he will always primarily be a loving and loved husband, father, son, brother and uncle. The loss is devastating to us all, and we would ask that privacy be given at this incredibly difficult time as we try to come to terms with and mourn the loss of a very special person. The family would like to thank and acknowledge the many prayers and good wishes sent during the past few difficult months, many of which we were unable to respond to, but all meant a lot to Craig and his family. We know that he was diagnosed with cancer in October last year, and he has now passed away at the age of 60. I mentioned, James and Mark, about that incredible, Leicester City Premier League title winning campaign, but I think also the fact that he was a constant, because he was there with Nigel Pearson before. So he was someone who gave an anchor to, I suppose, that crazy rollercoaster ride that Leicester fans went along. And it's so important to have that constant, to have that real sort of stability at a time of such change at the club. I just wonder, both of you, maybe Mark, you first, because you were in touch with Craig recently, weren't you? What are your memories of Craig?
Yeah, I'd spoken to Craig quite regularly since October when he had the diagnosis, and the one thing that amazed me about him was his positivity in every single response. And when you know someone's going through a tough time and you reach out to them and you chuck them a message just to see how they're doing, the speed in which he replied and the awareness of what I'd been doing. He always knew what games I was doing for Soccer Saturday, because he'd always referenced the game that I'd been at, some of the players that I'd potentially seen. And he always had such a positivity about him in his responses to me that it really made me feel like he was hitting this head on with the most optimism and positive manner that you could possibly have in a really tough circumstance. The fact that, like you rightly say, he'd been at Leicester City through so many different managers and times shows how highly thought of he was by the incoming manager. Yeah. Because you see so often that a manager comes in and wants to bring his own coaching staff, wants to bring his own people, and doesn't want any hangovers from a previous regime. Whereas Craig Shakespeare was a constant at Leicester City, and people wanted him around. People wanted him at the heart of that football club, and that was where he was at his very best. He was a coach, he was a football man. He was someone that wanted to impart that knowledge and wisdom on those players. You sense
he was quite had this pastoral care as well. Did you sense that from him?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's obviously shocking news and really sad news, and it's always at times like this you look to remember the good times and the good things. Everyone spoke so highly of him, and he was such a popular person within football. You saw Dean Smith brought him into his coaching team for a couple of seasons as well, and he was so highly regarded within football that people always wanted to have a conversation with him, always wanted to learn from him, always wanted to be in his company. And that's the one thing I've just been looking through some of the messages that I'd had with him and shared with him over the last few weeks and months, and he was once again talking about football. Every conversation revolved around football. Yeah. Special man, and a very sad day to see.
It's interesting, isn't it? We did mention it there in the statement, and it's interesting that the family point this out. Whilst the family are immensely proud of his footballing achievements as both a player and a coach, to us as family, he will always be primarily a loving and loved husband, father, son, brother and uncle. And it feels like ultimately that's felt by more people than just the family themselves. I'm sure that they feel that warmth and love. James, your thoughts?
He was such a gentleman in an industry which sometimes lacks decency, respect and honesty, and he was incredibly loyal to everybody he worked with, whether that be the managers that worked above him or the players he worked with. And when you look at what Leicester were able to do, bouncing back from nearly getting relegated the Great Escape under Nigel Pearson. Nigel Pearson departed the football club. Claudio Ranieri came in, but it was felt that it was Shakespeare that held everything together. Ranieri provided the flair, but it was Shakespeare that held that group of players together and kept them calm in those moments where no one believed what they were going to do, but they went on to do it. And Ranieri departed the club, and Shakespeare was there to steer the ship to safety in what was a really difficult time for the football club. And Leicester City fans who were there that night, and Leicester City fans watching on, will never forget what they did in Seville that night, reaching the Champions League quarter-finals, something which Leicester City fans would never believe.
What an adventure
possible.
that was.
It was remarkable what they went on to do, and they came so close to beating Atletico Madrid over 2 legs as well. A remarkable individual. Things didn't work out towards the end at Leicester City, but he bounced back working with a number of different clubs, always brought in, whether it be under Sam Allardyce, whether it be under Dean Smith, who he worked with so well over a number of years. It's a real loss to lose not only a brilliant football man, but a real gentleman as well.
Yeah, just looking at some of the stats of an impact. When he was named as new manager of Leicester City after Claudio Ranieri was sacked, he became the only English manager to win his first 4 league matches. That's incredible as an impact. I mean, I think also just in terms of relationships with players, Mark, you've talked about, how he is with the football community as a whole and how loved and respected he was. But, I'm sure that he had this way with players both young and more senior to really get the best out of them.
Yeah, everyone that worked with him loved him. Everyone that worked with him really loved him, not just as a coach, but as a human being. And I think that was, that will be one of the outstanding things you'll see over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours, where people pay tribute to this special man. Was not just his ability as a coach, but it was who he was as a person, a father figure, a mentor, someone that players could look up to, confide in, speak to. And just, he would be there to listen to them, and he would be aware of their problems. He was on their level. And I think that was one of the biggest things, and that would be certainly one of the things that come out is the way he was just that important figure for so many young players. And I think you'll see so many of those Leicester players that will say, without Craig Shakespeare, there is no Premier League title. He was such an important part of that group, that backroom team, and he was the grounding, the firm grounding.
An unsung hero, really, wasn't he? He was, you'll hear about Vardy, you'll hear about Ranieri in that story so often. But Craig Shakespeare, perhaps just one of the stories that's less told, Mark.
Yeah, and he was a part of arguably the greatest footballing fairy tale we'll ever see. And he'll have his place cemented in history now. And I feel for the fans, I feel for the family and everyone that's been connected with him, because everyone will be sad tonight and everyone will be hurting off the back of this very, very tragic news.
Yeah, and as you rightly say, we'll be watching out for those tributes, because we're sure they're going to be plentiful and very, very sincere in their message and people's own recollections and memories of Craig Shakespeare. Thank you for those memories yourselves, guys. Yeah, just to recap, devastating news this evening. The loss of Craig Shakespeare at the age of 60. We at Sky Sports also send our condolences to his family and friends.